maybe I'll start the greetings because that's the easiest part of this whole webinar to miss. Welcome everybody, good morning. My name is Boyan First. I'm Manager of Knowledge Mobilization at the Harris Center. And I also manage the Thriving Regions Partnership process, which the two research projects we're going to talk about today are a part of. What we are going to do first is I'm going to tell you a little bit about Harris Center and a little bit about Thriving Regions. Then Chris will introduce the process in your region. And since there is over 60 of us here, I think that we had 80 something people registered at this point. I would encourage everybody who is comfortable to introduce themselves in the comments. That way we have a good idea of who is here. So let me tell you about the Harris Center. For those of you who do not know, and we do have a couple of people who are attending out of interest and who have not been part of this process, the Harris Center is a unit of Memorial University responsible for knowledge mobilization, so for doing more with research and putting research into the hands of those who can use it to improve their lives. Thriving Regions Partnership Process is one of the programs we have here in Newfoundland and Labrador. That program is designed to help regions figure out some development priorities for the region. We then solicit research proposals within those priorities within the region, and then the researchers and the people in the region work together. For about a year, we have some funding to support those research projects. And then after a year, after the research projects are done, we bring everybody back together like we are doing right now in order to make that research widely known and to plan some future steps. As you can imagine, with COVID-19, all of that process has gone out the window a long time ago. So we are improvising here a little bit. Thank you for putting up with us. And we are doing this online. Normally we would be probably somewhere on the beautiful Baccalieu Trail enjoying your company. But now we're going to have to do this virtually from the gray St. John's. I'm going to turn it over to Chris, who is going to introduce the process and how it unfolded in your region. He will also introduce the two researchers we have with us today, and he will moderate the discussion afterwards. The best way to ask your questions is to use the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. Actually, I'm sorry, Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen, and pose questions there. I will keep track of all the questions, and Chris will occasionally ask me if there are any questions from the audience, and then we will try to answer as many of those questions as we possibly can. You don't have to wait until the presentations are over. You can type your questions as they occur to you. We'll keep track of those. And just so you know, we are recording this session, and it will be available later, probably sometimes next week, if you want to share it, or if you have to leave, or if you weren't able to attend today. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Boyan, and welcome everybody. And I know we still have some people signing in slowly, so I expect we'll have, we may do another sort of recap for folks who joined us a little bit late, but why don't we go ahead and get started. Again, I'm Chris Patterson. I'm with the Harris Center Knowledge Mobilization Coordinator. It's my pleasure to have been working with many of you and others on the Baccalieu Trail region for our Thriving Regions Partnership process. One sort of logistics note here, we were hoping to live stream this and therefore sort of record it and keep it available through YouTube. We just had some technical difficulties. It wouldn't allow us to sign in from the device I'm working from. So it will be recorded, but we'll figure out a different way to make it available for everyone, but it won't be on the YouTube channel. So we'll figure that out. But without further ado, so this, as Boyan mentioned, sort of we would have loved to be doing this in person in the Baccalieu region. Our typical Thriving Region partnership process, we would host a third workshop where we bring back our 3 researchers, or as many of the 3 researchers as are available, to share the results and findings of their work, and then engage with community members in a discussion around, what it all means and what they might do with it. So this is our next best attempt to try to simulate that, although obviously with the online and the number of people we have here, we won't be able to do as much of the discussion, but hopefully down the road, the information that's shared here, many of you will be able to sort of pick up and begin to use in discussions you have in the region. And I already know some of our planning team members have talked about sort of looking for ways to engage with folks in the region. Let's think about that. So for those who haven't been involved, this is, we're coming toward the end of our Thriving Regions partnership process for the Baccalieu Trail. It started, oh my goodness, almost 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, where we had we started working with our planning team to sort of scope out kind of how they wanted to approach this. And then from there, we held an initial workshop in Carbonear, where we had close to 60, 65 people in attendance. And for those of you there, remember, we kind of went through a process to identify what you all, saw in your region, what you'd like to see, what you had, hopes for your region. And that eventually became a description of a number of priorities or themes that were priorities for you all. We then took that back to Memorial and asked if there was anybody in the research community, faculty, students, staff, who'd be interested in doing applied research on one or more of those themes. Went through an evaluation process, identified 3 researchers and topics that the evaluation committee identified as being the ones that most interesting and most potentially impactful. Brought those folks back for a second workshop that, again, some of you attended in a bit of a, I think that was when we had to cancel once because of a blizzard, and then we came back again to New Perlican. So it was a smaller number, but definitely a good conversation. And now we have 2 of those researchers who are rejoining us because they've completed their work. And I have to say, having seen some of the results of their work a little while ago, it is fantastic. So we're really thrilled to be able to kind of share this with you. We didn't want to wait until we could do it in person because we thought the results of the work from Dale and Natalie were so good that we wanted to make sure you all saw them as soon as possible. So with that in mind, let's jump right into it. And one thing we didn't practice is whether Natalie or Dale, who's going to go first. So I'm going to suggest, Natalie, you go first, but if you all prefer something different, then just, let me know. I see head nodding, so okay. So we have the 2 projects. We have, and I've lost my notes here, so I apologize. I'm probably going to get the names of the projects all wrong, but 2 projects that in some ways are related. So Natalie Dignam, who's has all sorts of affiliations, is with MUN, is with Conservation Corps of Newfoundland, is with Heritage NL. So she wears many hats. And one of the hats she wears is she wanted to have a look to see if she could develop a series of podcasts that would sort of highlight the different interesting stories that could be told on and around the Baccalieu region. And so she had some interesting experiences having started this just as COVID hit. So she had to kind of change a little bit of her process, and she's going to talk a little bit about that. And then related to that, Dale's going to then follow up with a project where he and his team went out and sort of looked for what he referred to as hidden sort of intangible assets. So the skills, knowledge, people that were sort of doing things that you wouldn't often sort of think about as being sort of important skills and assets that a region and communities could build around. And so I think in some ways the 2 projects are nicely interrelated. So we're thrilled that they're both going to be able to kind of share them. And then after they're going to do some brief opening remarks for about 5 minutes each. We'll ask them questions. And as Boyan said, we really hope you all, as you're listening, will put your questions into the Q&A box or the chat box. We'll monitor them both. And once we get into the moderated session, Boyan will make sure we pull up those questions as much as we can. And although I haven't warned our 2 panelists on this, if we don't get to all of your questions, I might see if they'd be willing to respond to them after the fact to some of them, and we'll figure out, we'll do the best we can to get your questions answered as well. So without further ado, Natalie, would you like to sort of kick us off and share a little bit about your project and the hidden gems of the Baccalieu Trail region?
Sure. Okay, so my name's Natalie Dignam. I am a pretty recent graduate of the folklore program at Memorial University. And as Chris said, I've been kind of here and there, I currently am the communications coordinator at Conservation Corps, and this project is a podcast series called Hidden Gems of the Baccalieu Trail. So it changed a lot with COVID, but I just want to say that this project was done in partnership with the folklore department at Memorial University and CHMR 93.5 FM, which is a community radio station in St. John's. My background is in nonprofit communications, heritage, and radio. So it was kind of a nice mix of all those things. So originally what I hoped to do was to be out in the region, interviewing people on site, getting video clips and photographs to create a map with little videos and podcast stories that we're going to air out of the radio station and stream through the Living Heritage podcast, which is a podcast with Heritage NL. So COVID happened and no one could go out and do in-person field work, which was a huge bummer. But I tried to adapt and did lots of, I see some of my participants are here, which I'm so happy about, but did lots of phone interviews, Zoom interviews. So honestly, it was a nice way being locked down in St. John's to feel like I was still exploring Newfoundland a little and get out of my own apartment mentally, at least. So I hope that this series kind of gives people a chance to feel that way too. And I think one thing that it made me learn, I think that there was so much, I guess, like hunger during COVID for stories of other places, or just kind of like mentally being able to explore things either through podcasts or videos or books. And so in a way, I couldn't go out and do in-person field work, but I hope that I added something entertaining and maybe helped people plan for their future trips. So, and I'll hand it off to Dale now to talk about his piece.
Great, thank you, Natalie. And one thing, Dale, well, just to give you a chance to transition, I forgot to mention. So I mentioned we have a planning committee, and Matt McCarthy, who's in the chat box, sort of acknowledged he was on it. So I apologize to the rest of our planning committee members. So just real quickly, for those of you who aren't familiar, our planning committee, if you want to reach out to them, after the fact, was Matt McCarthy from Harbor Grace, and see if I can remember, Diane Hodge-Burt from CBDC, Kathy Stacy from the Legendary Coast, who's no longer there. So hopefully Chris Shepard is with us now. We had Ron Johnson from Eastern Health. We had Terry Murphy from College of North Atlantic, Jerry Dick from Heritage NL, Terry Abbott from Carboneer, Bev King, who's no longer with us, but when she was with the Boat Museum, Bev was on our planning committee. And I know I'm forgetting one person, and whoever you are, I apologize. So we had a nice, they were great. They kind of worked with us all the way through to help sort of plan this all out and encourage participation, and worked with some of our researchers to make connections. So just a public thank you to all of our planning committee members. So Dale, it's all yours.
Oh, you're muted, Dale.
Dale, you're still muted. Huh. Dale, we're not hearing you. And you're not showing as muted on my. Still not working. That's.
Okay, you hear me?
Oh, there you go. We can hear you now.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Perfect. Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Apologizing for the technical difficulties. This is what we've been living through as researchers for the last year, Natalie and I, having to deal with moving everything online. I was just saying that Bev King is no longer with us in the sense that she is no longer on the committee. She is still very much with us and opening a bakery on the shore. So that'll be a lovely addition to the Baccalieu Trail. I'm going to try and do a screen share here just to give you a bit of a sense of the traditional knowledge inventory that I've been working on. Let's see. So the project that I was involved with was the Baccalieu Trail Traditional Knowledge Inventory. And this was, again, through Heritage NL, but in partnership with our good colleagues at the Department of Folklore. And we had Katie Crane on as our intern who did a lot of the research. The idea behind the Baccalieu Trail Traditional Knowledge Inventory was to create a listing, a public listing of people who had interesting skills on the Baccalieu Trail, who would be willing down the road to partner with existing tourism operators to share their skills. So we started off with a survey and an online session to kind of launch the project. And we started reaching out to communities and to people at the community level, just seeing who was out there with interesting skills, who would be willing to be put on a public listing of some kind. So the idea behind the inventory is that it will be a public document, and the primary audience we're hoping are tourism operators. So those might be tour planners or operators, or bed and breakfast owners, restaurant owners, anyone who is actively engaged with tourists on the on the Baccalieu Trail on the peninsula, and might be interested in developing some kind of partnership to offer an additional program or additional service to their guests. So the idea is that this will be a financially beneficial proposition for both parties, that the tourism operator might be able to extend their offering, or their B&B owner might be able to offer a package of some kind, and that they will be able to direct some money back towards skills holders in the community. So the way the inventory is set up, it's broken down by community. And then within community, we have just a short description of the person who has those traditional skills and the sorts of things they're willing to share with their contact information. So there's two examples here, one from Harbor Grace South and one from Heart's Content. Ed Spurl, who will teach you anything you want to know about kind of traditional way of life, salting fish, woodworking, vegetable gardening, smoking capelin, might even teach you how to play 120s. Lori Pitcher over in Heart's Content, who is a sewer and sealskin worker, is open to the idea of transferring some of those skills. We wanted to make this a friendly, accessible document for people to look at. And we got a really interesting range of people. And I wanted to include this one from White Away, Shanna Brown here, who is probably our youngest participant, but who is a button accordionist, who is a baker and a rug hooker and interested in sharing her skills. And in the same community, we have Clifford George, who is no stranger to people on the Baccalieu Trail. One of the little, I think he's a feature in one of Natalie's podcasts, and he told one of his many, many fabulous stories. And so we decided we'd include a little bit of that just to give a flavor of the presenters into the document itself. So we have all kinds of skills that are represented in the region, everything from pottery to indigenous basket making. And we're hoping that this will give people opportunities to be more actively involved in skills transmission. So we want people to get out and get messy and do things while they're visiting, and to showcase the skills that exist in the region, and to kind of increase the awareness that these things can have a financial benefit for the community. And so we have all kinds of different people who are represented in this study. If you want to learn how to make snowshoes, perhaps Edwin Bishop might be able to help you out. We also wanted to give some resources for those skill holders themselves who might be thinking of developing some kind of local business. So we included 2 case studies in the document as well. One on the Wooden Boat Museum, and how the Wooden Boat Museum is using workshops and training opportunities as a way of generating revenue for a social enterprise. And then also we wanted to showcase Barb Parsons-Suley, who I think is in our audience today, just how people can start to develop local businesses that really incorporate local heritage and local knowledge. So people are coming here, and certainly hiking is one thing that we know our visitors to the Baccalieu Trail are really interested in, and they really want to experience the depth of local knowledge. They want those stories that bring the place to life. And so we included Barb here as an example of how that is already happening in the region. And the idea isn't that people necessarily take an idea and copy it. The idea is that they take the skills that they have and develop their own products and projects that focus on that local skill and local knowledge. As we were doing this, we realized there's just an incredible body of knowledge out in the community. One of our people that we focused on was a traditional wriggle or riddle fence maker in New Perlican. And I think we have some people from New Perlican here today. And so this really nicely fits into other projects that Heritage NL is doing around traditional crafts and skills. So we're hoping we'll be back out into the region and doing some public workshops and training courses to teach things like how do you make a traditional wriggle fence. So stay tuned for that. We are going to be doing more work with Craft at Risk in the region, developing a training program right now with Heritage NL to teach some of these traditional skills. And we'd love to do more demonstration and workshop projects once we're all vaccinated and can get safely back to doing work in person.
Great. Awesome. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, Natalie. I notice there's already one question, and it's as much, it was targeted for you, Dale, but it may be as much for us, Boyne. So you want to, it's sort of how do we get access to these resources?
I will, towards the closure of the session, I will post links to Dale's report. And I am also going to post a link to an episode of Rural Roots, which is a Harris Center podcast, where I talk to Natalie and Dale with a little bit different focus of the conversation. And we are also, part of that podcast episode is Natalie's 14-minute how-to piece on how to make your own podcast about your own skill. So yes, we will post these materials in the chat towards the end of the session, and I will make sure that you all know that the links are there.
Yeah, and also, are we going to, I think, Boyne, we're also going to put the link up that shows where all the map for all of Natalie's podcasts as well?
Yes,
yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, so there'll be 3 different, yeah, great.
We had also had a conversation at Heritage NL about doing some print versions of these documents, especially for people like bed and breakfast owners. It's nice to be able to have the physical document. All of that's been a little slowed down because of COVID, but if there are people who are interested in getting a future print copy of the report, you can just drop me a line, dale@heritagenl.ca, and we'll sort that all out over the coming months.
Yeah. All right, thank you. So let me jump in. I have a couple of questions that I'd like to pose to our panelists. And before I do that, again, to everyone, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box, and Boyne will monitor that, and I'll loop back with Boyne periodically to see if we can start weaving those in. But just to start off with, you know, as I mentioned earlier, Natalie and Dale, both of you were sort of doing these were independent projects, but in some ways they were similar. They were using different medium, but they were both kind of looking for, you know, hidden gems, hidden assets, things that may not be recognized by even people in their own communities as sort of skills, resources, just interesting stories. I'm curious, as you kind of did that, I'd love to hear, were there any surprises even to you? Because my sense is that you kind of had a sense of what you might find, but as you got into this work, you know, besides dealing with COVID, that whole surprise, were there actual surprises in the stories, people, you know, skills, you know, maybe 1 or 2 stories that just sort of said, wow, I didn't expect that, or that's interesting, particularly interesting. Love to kind of hear your reactions as you went through that work. And you're both muted. There we go, down.
Yeah, I guess I'll go first because I think maybe there was more surprises for me. Dale has been doing this work in Newfoundland for quite a long time, and I am not from Newfoundland, so everything's always a surprise to me when I get to do work here. But I think my favorite thing that my experience from doing this project and really not being able to actually physically go out and travel very much was I did a volunteer day with the Newfoundland Pony Society and got to go up to the heritage pasture in Cupid's. And I didn't even know it was there, and I loved it. It was so awesome to get to go there and meet the ponies after having done an episode with Clifford George's stories on the Newfoundland ponies. And for me, that kind of showed really like the goal of the project was to show people the really interesting stories and things happening in the Baccalieu Trail region. And I kind of got to have that experience for myself where I was like listening to these stories and I was like, man, it'd be so cool to like actually, where are these Newfoundland ponies? And then I got to like go to the pasture and help them build a fence. So that was a really cool experience for me. And Dale might talk about this as well, but I think having COVID happen and having to do everything virtually definitely was a bit of an obstacle, I think. So we did our best with connecting with people. I think there would have been more. I can see in the chat there's so many people doing interesting work and things that I'm still learning about, and I think not being able to be on the ground doing that field work. So we discovered people and work as much as we could, but definitely COVID was a huge obstacle to that.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie. Dale?
I think one thing that continuously surprises me, and it probably shouldn't at this point, but it continues to surprise me, is how quickly people are to downplay their own skills and knowledge. You know, people constantly say to me, you know, why do you want to know about that old foolishness? Or like, no one cares about, you know, me and the household kind of or garden skills that I have. And I honestly think that people are endlessly fascinated by that kind of stuff. And I think people have so much knowledge that they take for granted. And so I hope that in a way the project helps to kind of elevate the discussion around some of those things. Just something as simple as, you know, putting in your potato garden in the spring is something that people are really fascinated by. And I think that there is an incredible hunger for some of those kind of domestic skills these days. And I think when tourists come, those are the kinds of things that they want to experience and hear.
Yeah, and actually, Dale, I was actually going to ask a follow-up question of Natalie, but I'll ask you both. You know, did you find people were hesitant to speak with you, particularly since you really couldn't go meet them? So oftentimes, you know, you have these conversations in person, and you can just kind of get and kind of evolve into it. I mean, you were, I'm guessing, calling people. You know, you're contacting them in a faceless way. How did, you know, were people, you know, how did you find people's willingness to talk with you and share these stories, which, as you said, Dale, you know, oftentimes they don't see as being all that interesting or important?
I think, you know, the thing about Newfoundlanders is that they love to talk. You know, they'll always tell you a story. I find the challenging part with this project was because the inventory is structured in such a way that the contact information is made public. So it's one thing to have a skill and be willing to kind of talk to me about it on the phone. One of the stumbling blocks was really convincing strangers that they should give me all their contact information that we could make publicly accessible. I think people are a little, and understandably so, a little bit shy about that. I also think the kind of the entrepreneurial piece that we put in, I think this happens all the time. Newfoundlanders are very quick to give away their knowledge and their stories. And we're not quite maybe at the point where we're starting to think about those things in terms of rural development and business development. So I can see us with Heritage NL as we move forward, that kind of business marketing piece is certainly something we're going to need to address.
Yeah, and we're going to come back to that in a minute, but so thanks for bringing that. Natalie, what was anything, reflections on kind of your experience trying to do this? And
I think the biggest challenge for me is I was contacting people who are more established tourism operators or haven't been doing this kind of cultural work for a while. So not that Dale's participants weren't, but maybe people who are like actively already offering kind of like tourism experiences and stuff like that. And I think the biggest challenge was that I was trying to connect with people during traditionally their busiest season. And also I think it was a huge struggle for Newfoundland, really like the world, all tourism operators. So I think a lot of people were trying to pivot or deal with obstacles related to that, or trying to figure out how to even just get through the summer. So I give anyone, you know, who did participate in the podcast series, like, I am so thankful that they made time for that, because I know it was honestly a very difficult summer for the whole province and all our tourism operators. So it was really nice to have people make time to still chat with me about the work they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, I haven't seen anything coming in either chat box or Q&A. I haven't seen anything, but I want to pause before I go on to my next question for.
We do have one question coming up. It's a little bit more complicated. It has to do with the conflicts between tourism and other industries, such as the mink farm in the area, and how those play against each other. If you feel comfortable answering now, you can, but maybe we can save it, because we do get to talk about tourism and what these opportunities are. So maybe we can address it then.
Yeah, we'll come back to it, sort of talking about this in regional development opportunities, et cetera. So that sounds like a good fit there. So, all right. Natalie, Dale, I mean, the stories I confess, Natalie, I haven't listened to all of your podcasts, but I've listened to many of them, and Dale, look through your, I mean, the stories are just amazing. I mean, it's just so, I mean, when I was captivated by, and I hope everyone, when they get a chance to listen and read, will sort of have the same reaction. How do you see these as being assets for, or building blocks for sort of regional development? I mean, you know, in some ways it ties in a little bit, Dale, with your point about how people don't think of this as an entrepreneurial opportunity. I mean, these are just stories. This is kind of who we are. This is what we do. But now, you know, with COVID and everything else facing the province and the region and tourism and otherwise, I mean, people obviously need to start thinking about how do we build back, and what does that look like? And both of your research findings and your products clear. I mean, these are huge assets in here that could be built upon and from. Have you all given any thoughts to sort of how you know, what you've done here might be used as a building block for some of that those regional development discussions? I'd love to hear you sort of your thoughts and insights that people can then sort of pick up and run with in different ways.
Natalie, do you want to say, or do you want me to go? I have lots of thoughts about that. One is that I think that doing this on a regional basis is great, and having one document that we can kind of share with everyone is really good. I think that even within the region, the real experts on where the experts are at the community level. So I could really see, you know, a town, for example, a town economic development officer or a town volunteer committee kind of building their own version of the inventory that's just for the town. And I think sometimes that local people are better able to make those connections. It's not some guy coming in from an office in town to the region asking these questions. And I think if people are a little reticent maybe to get involved, you know, at a regional level, certainly at the local level, they might be more willing. Certainly, you know, anyone who's ever done work in rural Newfoundland knows how incredibly important the role of volunteers is. And so these networks kind of already exist in our communities. And I think maybe finding a way to, I guess, kind of better document those at the local level is one way that communities can start to use that information. The other one is maybe a bit more philosophical. There's a writer that I reference often by the name of Susan Strauss. She's an environmental educator, works for the U.S. Park Service, and she writes about storytelling. She's a storyteller, and she talks about how when you want to get people kind of passionate about an ecological issue, like if you're building a trail or you're doing something with a wetland or whatever, sometimes those concepts are really abstract for people. And she says the way to get people to develop a passion for places is to share stories. Because once you start to understand the stories of a place, then you develop a reverence for that place. So I think it is really important, even at a local development level, to share stories. It's not always we're selling stories to tourists. We're telling our own stories so that we can build support for projects within our community. So I think that's important. And I think, again, like maybe I'll throw Natalie in front of the bus here, but I think the kind of projects that Natalie does, we had a conversation with Boyan about the importance of community radio. And I know some places in the region are looking at community radio and just sharing those local stories. And I think there is a hunger for the kind of work that Natalie's doing, just recording those stories and getting those stories out to local people so that they better know what their neighbors are doing and what's happening in the community down the road.
Yeah, and I'll just double down on one of your comments before we turn over to Natalie to respond. This idea of storytelling or whatever it is, it helps communities appreciate and, if you will, love themselves, is a key ingredient for other people to start loving your own community. So just sort of knowing kind of and feeling good, and some people call it sense of place and pride in place, whatever you want to call it. But I think, even if that's the way you start with it, that's an important first step, if you will, in terms of thinking about sort of regional and economic and community development. So Natalie, what would you, now that Dale has kind of set you up, what would you add to that?
I think Dale framed it so wonderfully, and it really reflected my experience making this podcast, that there's going to be so many people that go in and listen to the 9 or 10 podcast episodes and be like, this isn't a hidden gem to me, or like, she missed so many things. Like, yes, I definitely missed things, and Dale's totally right that I made my end episode, as Boyan mentioned, an instructional basically episode about how to create your own podcast, and I think it's really made me think, especially during COVID when we couldn't physically travel, how can we use digital storytelling to give people kind of that sense of place and inspire that interest. For me, my example was really like the Newfoundland ponies. Like, listening to the stories about the ponies got me so into it. And then I was so excited to meet them. Like, it's so dorky, but I was just like over the moon about it when I went up to the pasture. But that's exactly kind of the experience that I think this kind of storytelling can offer. And I think people in the community are already taking advantage of many different avenues of doing this. So podcasting, community radio is definitely one avenue to share information and stories and make people interested in the work that's being done. Another one that I've loved is that Greats Cove is doing Instagram lives, Greats Cove TV. I've been watching those, love those. Barb Parson-Souley's with Wind at Your Back Hiking is doing trail tours that she posts on Facebook, and people love those because then they can plan and I've been so inspired by that working at Conservation Corps. After I saw how popular hers were, I asked the young people that work on the trails in the summer, I was like, oh, do video trail tours, because I could see that people were really into that. And a lot of these kids are high school kids, did TikToks, which I really wish I didn't get on TikTok, but it just shows you there are so many avenues of sharing these stories, and really digital platforms that don't have to be super complicated. I ended up, I guess one advantage was making this podcast at home without any of the equipment or the studio or anything I thought I was going to have. So I really hope that this just kind of inspires people to look at all of these tools that we have to share what we're already doing.
And I want to come back to both of you who've kind of set up the idea of what could communities and individuals do to sort of build on what you all done. But Boyan, you look like you might have something either to add or ask.
Yes, I know that at this point, everybody's dying to see this report and hear these episodes. So I'm going to post the 3 links, but I will keep posting them occasionally. So the 3 links you're seeing here is a link to the map with all the episodes that Natalie produced. There is a link to Deo's report, and there is a link to the episode of Rural Roots featuring Deo and Natalie in conversation with me and with Natalie's how-to guide on making your own radio show.
Perfect. And with that as a segue, again, sort of encourage folks, if you have questions or comments you'd like to share, please put them in the Q&A box or chat box, and Boyan is monitoring that, and we'll definitely sort of bring those forward to the full discussion. Last question for me, though, for both Natalie and Dale, and you both touched on this a bit. As I was looking through your products, my first reaction was already shared was, oh, this is amazing, this is great, gotta love this. My next reaction was, but this is just the beginning. There's got to be 10 times more great stories and assets, and there's no way that you two can go and capture all this, nor probably should you. So the question that came to my mind, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is, so what could a community do, or could a regional group do, or any, how could folks turn these into, if you will, living documents or living products, and really start to own them as their own? Do you have thoughts on how people can build on these and really make them theirs and add stories and so forth to them?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I was thinking as Natalie was just talking, one of my kind of secret hopes, and what I think might be actually kind of a, we always like to talk about measures of success of projects and whatnot, is that I hope someone messages me all angry and says, why am I not in this document? Because great, that means that, yes, absolutely, you should be included in the document. And the document isn't meant to be a fixed thing. I want people to feel like, yeah, this is a great idea and we want to participate. So certainly if people want to add on, just get in touch with me and we can continuously update this document. And then if there are people who want to kind of start to develop this at the community level and want to build one for their town, for example, it's really very, very simple to do. And we can walk you through the process and get you started and help you out doing whatever you need to do in terms of sharing traditional knowledge and skills. And, and I know that maybe I can speak a little more freely in some ways than Natalie, in that I see that our project will continue on in a way. So if there are people who want to learn some of those more technical skills, like the kind of stuff that Natalie's doing, there might be opportunities for us at Heritage NL to help out with some of those things. And Natalie's intro podcast on how to do podcasting is a great start. But if you wanted us to come out and do some kind of workshop in the community about recording stories, that's something that I do at Heritage NL all the time. And maybe I'll drag Natalie out when I go.
I do miss it. Like, I really do. Like, it's been a hard year not to go out and chat with people and do all of that fun stuff that I've gotten to do at Heritage NL and with CHMR. Yeah, man, I feel like I kind of touched on some of my ideas for like, people being able to take advantage of like the digital tools that we already have, like social media and Instagram Live and the trail tours. Trying to think if I have anything to add to that. Yeah, like Dale said, I just really hope people do see the gaps in the work we've done, and realize like, oh, I have this in my town, or I have even just as the year has gone on, like going out to Carbonear and seeing the work that they've done on the waterfront I think it's beautiful. I was like, this should be, like, I can't believe I didn't realize like how gorgeous it is out there. I'm always discovering new things in that region. And one thing I really wanted to do kind of before COVID hit, I thought it would just be cool just to like, print out the map as a little brochure and then have like, you can scan it and then listen to the episode. It's so like not that like hard to make. So I could just hope that people like end up doing stuff like that once we're able to travel a little more freely.
Yep. So what I've heard from both of you is that people shouldn't be kind of afraid of doing this. I mean, in some ways, not to downplay the work that you all put into it, but it's not rocket science. And Natalie, to your point, I mean, you didn't have all your equipment and you found a way to still do it. So it's not like the technology is a barrier for most folks. And it also sounds like in different ways, both of you could potentially be resources for folks if they do want to try to pick it up. So that's awesome. I noticed that one of the questions was the links weren't showing up, and I think it was because Boyan initially sent them just to the panelists, and they've been resent. So if you didn't see the links initially, they're up there again. So that's one. Boyan, what else? Do we have others?
Yeah, we have Karis Cotter asking if Natalie could repeat what she said about Barbara Sully's trail somethings. However, Barb is here. So Barb, if you would like to post a link to your Instagram, go for it.
Yeah, but go ahead, Natalie, if you want to respond in terms of the.
Oh, I was talking about Barb has been posting little trail tour videos of different trails in the region that she's been doing tours on, and they've just been so fantastic. Like she's been posting them in the hiking groups and then her own account, and they've just been really popular, and people are always asking questions. Can I bring my kid on this trail? What does it look like? Is the terrain okay for my old dog? Like things that maybe you're not gonna get out of the hiking book. And I just thought that it was just a really great idea and people have loved it. So
yeah. Any other? So you've got our attention, folks, for at least another 15 minutes, if not longer. So any questions, thoughts, comments that you'd like to share? And maybe we'll just pause for a second because I know Dale has more to share. But I'm going to force him to pause 1 minute to give people a chance to sort of type things in there. Boyan, do you have something?
Well, maybe we can talk about the conflict between the kind of tourism industry that is very dependent on traditional skills, on the beauty of the landscape, and the need to make other kinds of living, such as, in this particular case, mink farming, meat production. Dale, maybe a question for you, and I know this is a tricky answer, so as much as you want to. Have you seen places that are managing to kind of figure out how to do this together? Because yeah, it's hard to do just to depend on just one industry in a region.
Yeah, I think it is something that comes up. I know we've done work in other parts of the province. A good example might be Woody Point, which has kind of a growing summer tourism industry, but then also has a fish plant right in the center of the town. And sometimes there are conflicts between the perceived work of one or the other. And I don't know if I have a solution to it, but I think, we always try and promote, communication and the sharing of information back and forth so that everyone really knows what's happening. I think one thing that we don't really have in a consistent way across the province are kind of those like a Better Business Bureau or a Chamber of Commerce, where there is kind of a business group that is able to meet and then kind of interact with the community. So I think those kind of business groups where they do exist, need to be open to conversations with the wider community, because I think there are ways that we can have industry and business and still have tourism and still have a good place to live. But I think sometimes it really does take clear communication between the different parties about what their actual objectives and goals are. I think as well, at the municipal level, having clear guidelines and policies around development as they relate to business and where there might be an impact on things like trail development or access to waterfront. I know these are all really contentious issues in Newfoundland. But again, I think having them be as open and transparent as possible is really, really important.
Yeah, and one thing I'll throw in there. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Dale.
And I'm going to throw something else into going back to a previous point, I'm going to throw something into the chat as well. One of the things that we did when we were working on this, because it was all online, is we started a Baccalieu Trail Heritage and Memories Facebook group, because there really wasn't a Facebook group that kind of looked at the entire trail. And that is there as a resource for anyone doing work in the region that they can post to and put information there.
Yep. Natalie, real quick, I was about to chat you. The link you just sent was sent just to the panelists. If you want to resend that to all attendees, that'd be great. The other comment I was going to make was, I know in some other regions that where the Harris Center works, one of the conversations that happens in some of those places is this idea of a working landscape being a tourist attraction. So whether it's mining or fishery, so obviously that's not going to work for everything, but sort of looking at the assets you have and say, all right, why would people want to come look at this, and sort of weave that in, if you will, into sort of the tourism package that region is offering up. So that's just another possibility depending on kind of what you're working with. Natalie, did you have anything you wanted to add to that?
I'm definitely not an expert in this area. I've done some reading about, as you were saying, heritage tourism, and just like you're talking about the conflicts of that. And then from my own experience being from the States, I think for me, like Vermont has a very similar conflict between like the tourism of the rural ideal, and then also actually having like working farms and working industry, and that. And even in my own experience, I'm from Boston, a lot of our like harbors have been turned into, I don't know, even when I go back now, and I've not been in Newfoundland for that long, like our working harbors are turned into shopping centers or places for hotels. So it's a very interesting transformation. I think it's something that is happening in many different places as well, and definitely something I've read about too. But I don't have I don't want to speak to trying to give any advice, because I'm definitely not well versed in it, but I think it's something that's on many local communities' minds right now. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks. Boyan, you had something, either another question or a comment?
Yes, Darlene King says, would you consider doing a studio tour in the Baccalieu area during the summer tourism season? Not sure who this question is for, but I'm pretty sure I know what either of you is going to say.
I think that's an excellent idea for a tourism operator to do. And that's kind of our hope, is that someone will take this information and develop a business out of it. There's lots of great places to visit in terms of studios. And I think there's an opportunity for someone to develop that as an offering, and I know there are, there's a company, I think on the Southern Shore, the Mobile Goat, where they have like a little van and they pick up tourists and drive them around to different places. I think that is an absolutely great idea, and something that certainly has potential on the Baccalieu Trail.
And I will say, and I hate to put, I don't know if Diane Hodgebert with this CBDC is still with us on this call, but and I've talked with her in the past about they also will get work term students, and they have other resources. So whether it's the CBDC or whether it's Legendary Coast, I mean, some of these regional organizations, if you're as a tourism operator or a studio operator, you're not quite ready to take that on, as Dale suggested, but would like to participate, maybe there's a conversation to be had with one of these regional organizations to see if they might be able to sort of help out, do something along those lines, maybe in partnership with Heritage NL. So who knows? Boyan, anything further?
Karen just mentioned that her husband and her are considering this project, Sea Glass Bed and Breakfast.
Mm-hmm. And Diane Hodgebert just put in the chat box, great stuff. We have resources. That's a brave statement in a chat box. Say we have resources. So anyway, follow up directly with Diane if you have some interests or thoughts in doing something along those lines. Any before we close out here, maybe I'll in a second, I'm going to invite our two panelists to offer any sort of closing reflection, and then I'm going to turn it back over to Boyan. But before we do, just let me pause. Any further questions or comments from anybody in the audience? And again, I thank all of you for your patience with with the numbers we had. We just couldn't do sort of the truly interactive session that you're maybe used to on Zoom. So I appreciate you sort of engaging in this way on this sort of Zoom webinar approach. So last chance to throw a question or a comment into the Q&A box. Anything, Boyan? Are we good to go?
Karen just mentions that Michael was part of a studio tour for 20 years, and we recognize all the wonderful talent here. So
Yeah.
Clearly that is something that the region could develop.
Yep, yep, cool. All right. Natalie, Dale, any sort of last, I was about to say any pearls of wisdom to leave us with, but that's a lot of pressure. So any last sort of thoughts or reflections you'd like to share before we sign off?
I think I'll just say a big thank you for everyone who participated in this podcast series, and CHMR for supporting this work. I really do have such a love for community radio. That's kind of where I came to all my heritage work. So yeah, I'm just really thankful that everyone was so open to being part of this. So
thanks, Natalie.
Just the last thing I'll say, which is something I say all the time when I'm doing heritage related sessions, is that, we talk about tourism a lot, but I think ultimately when we're talking about building businesses and building experiences, build something that local people want to do. I mean, when we build events and attractions and workshops and tours that local people love, that's the kind of stuff that tourists also want to do. And so we see things on the trail now, like the microbreweries and the distillery in Clark's Beach, that are really, really popular with locals. It's hard if you're a tourist to get in the Dildo brewery these days, I think, because it's so popular with locals. I mean, those become tourism attractions when there's a local audience, and local people are your best spokespeople. So if you can develop good local content that keeps local people interested, that will have a real spin-off in terms of tourism development.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, well said. So I just want to thank both Dale and Natalie, and I've been sort of looking at the chat box, and we have a whole bunch of folks putting in their thanks and appreciation to both of you as well. So we've been thrilled with, we enjoy all the projects we fund, but just want to sort of, the two of you, what you pulled off here, given the circumstances, has just been amazing. So thank you both for all your work and what you've done, and look forward to sort of seeing how it continues to sort of go on. And before I turn it over to Boyan to kind of close us out, I do want to pull out one comment. And Dale, you threw out the term, and it was performance measure, measure of success before, or something like that. And there was one in here that caught my attention, which I'm so grateful that at least we've hopefully struck this chord for many people. And this is from Teresita McCarthy saying, "Thank you so much, everyone. Great work." And then, where was it? I missed it. You went on to say, inspiration and hope. So I know one of the things we talked about, and when we did this session, is we wanted to sort of give some inspiration and hope. We're facing some tough times, but the products that Natalie and Dale have done here kind of show that, yeah, there's a lot to build on. There's a lot to be proud of and a lot to build on in the Baccalieu Trail region, as well as probably many other places. So thank you for the feedback from all of you, and it's been a pleasure to do this. Boyan, what's next? Oh, sorry, one more thing. I forgot one last thing on mine. We had 3 projects. So for those of you who may be wondering, so we funded 3 projects in the Baccalieu Trail. The 3rd project was looking at some infrastructure assessment, sort of using a watershed approach and a community-based approach. Joe Dario is still working on that project. So as soon as he's done and ready to kind of share the results from that, we'll be back in touch, and you're on our list now. So as soon as that is available and we can share his results, we'll be back in touch and let you know if invite you to join that session as well. So that's still in progress. So Boyan.
I won't take much more of your time. I'm going to paste those links one more time in the chat. We are also going to email everybody who registered online and left their email address, so you don't have to dig through this chat box. That's very active. I want to thank, of course, Dale and Natalie, but also Chris, not just for facilitating this session, but also for marshaling all these projects and this whole process through despite COVID-19. We are sincerely hoping that we can do things back in person, sometimes in the fall, I suspect. And we are continuing to look forward working with all of you on projects and on your ideas. The links will get you to a variety of places. Feel free to subscribe to the podcast, visit the website with Natalie's stories, but ICH blog site, Dale has been running it for a very long time, and it's such a wealth of information. I warn you, it's a rabbit hole. You may find yourself spending hours without even realizing. Thank you, everybody, and I hope we get to do this again when Joe's done with his project.
One last reminder for folks who maybe joined a little bit late, this session was recorded. We had hoped to have it on YouTube. It was not because of some technical issues. So we will take this recording and we will send out an email to let you know how you can access this recording and make it available to others as well. So we'll be back in touch with that information. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.